morning, and thank you all for attending our candidate forum today. We appreciate your interest in good government. The format will continue as we have done earlier today. So we, of course, have given the audience members an opportunity to write questions down for us that we'll be using later in the program. We have questions also submitted from the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County. So we'll have questions initially from our panelists, whom I will ask to introduce themselves in just a minute. And we have already drawn with the candidates for the order of presentation today. And so our first remarks will come from Director Irma Hendricks. That'll be followed by remarks from Grayson Shelton, and lastly from Robert Webb. And that's a random order, and so we will sequence that order differently as we go through our questions. The person who opens the forum will speak last and make the final closing statement. And as we go through our questions, we'll have the responses being alternated among the candidates. Now, on your opening statements, candidates, please limit yourself to 2 minutes, and also on the closing statement to 2 minutes. And we'll have a little reminder that we'll flash occasionally from our official timekeeper. In the questions themselves, if you would limit your replies to 1 minute each, and there will also be some opportunity for follow-up questions, and those will be 1 minute each as well for our audience questions. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for one candidate to ask the other two candidates a question in our final segment. And again, if you would limit your comments at that point to 1 minute. So at this point, let me ask the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll start with opening statements. Ron, would you start, please?
Yes, Ron Muse with Forest Hills Neighborhood Association.
Thank you.
In Ward 2.
I'm Carol Young, representing the League of Women Voters of Pulaski County, and I live in Ward 3.
My name is LaRon McAdoo, and I live in the Barrow community, John Barrow community, Ward 6.
Great, LaRon. Thank you very much to our panelists also for participating today. So candidates, if you're ready, if we would start with Director Hendricks and your opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Irma Hendricks, the current City Director for Ward 1, and I would like to share with you a little of my background. I am a native of the City of Little Rock. I have worked hard for Ward 1. Will share with you some of the activities that I have been involved in. For a long, long time, I was the state conference president of NAACP. I traveled all over the state. I know the many, many needs and concerns of all people. I also served and was an administrator with the anti-poverty program, with the Model Cities program. Right now, I am a member of several neighborhood associations within the City of Little Rock, of which I attend often. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Hendricks. Now, Grayson Shelton, your opening statement, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Grayson Shelton. I am not originally from Little Rock. I'm from Paragould, Arkansas in the Northeast. I graduated from Arkansas State University with a bachelor's in 2006, and I've lived in the Central Arkansas area for 7 years, including 4, maybe even 5 by now, in the downtown area. I think one thing I'd like to note while I have 2 minutes is that we've all been having a pretty good time with this the last couple of weeks. So I think you've been seeing a lot of smiles up here. I think that we are going in the right direction as far as everybody pretty much has a version of the same idea. I think we want to improve what we've been doing. We want to continue the good things and get rid of some of the bad things. One of the things that I am campaigning under is that I am new. I'm young, obviously, younger than both of these. I'm bringing both these people. I'm bringing the average age of voters down by quite a bit. But I think that really helps me. I think that's a growing group of people in this city. I think that they would like to be represented, and I'm working towards that. I think that one of the advantages is that we don't have to hold on to some of the old things that are in place due to obligation. We can just stick with what works and what doesn't work. So thank you very much, and I'd appreciate your vote on November 4th.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shelton. And then we'll hear from Robert Webb.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for putting the forum together. It's always important to have informed and educated voters when making your decision on Election Day. My name is Robert Webb, and I'm running for city board. I'm running for city board of directors. In Ward 1, we have a plethora of issues, and unfortunately, in the last 7 years, we haven't addressed those issues seriously. I think we can truly address those issues through a plan for revitalization and redevelopment. We can address the issue of crime in our community. We can address the issue of blight in our community. We can also address the issue of infrastructure in our community. As this process goes on today, I'll address those issues in an intelligent and comprehensive way, giving you a better understanding of what we plan to do if elected on November 4th to be your city director. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Webb. Let me just also mention that there is a fourth candidate in this race, and Herb Broadway was not able to attend today. Now, we'll start with the questioning part of the forum. And first of all, since there are three candidates, let me just mention to you that the order will vary, as I said earlier, in terms of when you will be asked to answer the question. It's not an attempt. There's no sleight of hand going on here. It's just seemed fair to rotate that, and when there are three candidates, that rotation will be different on different questions. So bear with us and be prepared for the question. You may be the first to answer, you may be the last to answer. Is that fair enough?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, for the first question, why don't we have ladies first, and I'll ask for Carol Young to begin.
Thank you. If elected to the Little Rock City Board, what will be your top 3 priorities?
And that will be to Mr. Webb, to Mr. Shelton first.
Okay. My top 3 priorities are 3 things that I think I'm passionate about as far as my goals. One of the things I want to do is help to empower the neighborhood associations and give them more flexibility within their communities to do more activities, to work towards advertising and branding. I would also like to address improving city services from making our city services better for everyone, as well as improving relations between municipal homeless outreaches and private.
Thank you. Then we'll hear from Mr. Webb.
I think crime, blight, and infrastructure, again, are our 3 biggest concerns in Ward 1. I would address those through a comprehensive plan for redevelopment that's implemented by Ward 1 residents, for Ward 1 residents, that employs Ward 1 residents. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Hendricks.
The 3 things that I would really be concerned with is community involvement. We do not have enough of that as far as what should and could take place with more community participation. Fairness, I think, is another thing that needs to happen when it comes to the distribution of services, funds, and just whatever it is that involves the city. The last thing would be to be sure that whatever it is that I do up here will be representative of the people that I represent.
All right, thank you, candidates. Now, our next question will come from the League of Women Voters, and we'll, coalition, and we'll start answering with Mr. Webb. Thank you.
Me to go first. As a candidate for city director representing Ward 1, what is your position on the current discussions of the Arkansas Highway and Transportation Department's interest in widening Interstate 30 and Interstate 630? What will you do, if anything, to help protect the established neighborhoods from displacement and loss of community and livability?
Well, as you know, they're currently saying that that's not a, they're currently saying that that's just a, right now that's just a idea. So they haven't actually put anything to paper. They said they're going to do a study. And we know how that goes, right? We had the Tech Park debacle back in 2011. But I honestly don't see that being an issue, and I don't honestly see that being an issue right now. But if it were to be an issue, I don't think we need more lanes on 630. Several studies say that if you build the freeways or expand those freeways, then you will of course incur more traffic. So I don't see a necessary need for an additional lane on 630 or 30. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Director Hendricks.
I will almost say that there has been maybe 2 meetings I'm aware of about information with the Highway Department. I received that information, I'm almost sure, before it even was sent out to the public. This is something I think, I see it as a distraction for what really needs to take place within the community. I have visited with some of the administrators with the Highway Department, and that plan is so far off. My interest would really be to deal with what's at hand right now, the needs of the people within this city. Infrastructure, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, that's my answer.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Shelton.
I'll agree with my other candidates in saying that I think that it's not something that's an immediate concern. However, as a representative of the ward and of the people, my job would be to gather opinions from everybody within the community based on their opinions on it, and just do a good job of representing them and getting their ideas to the argument.
All right, thank you. All right, for our third question, let me just say that we'll start with Director Hendricks for the answers, and I'm going to ask Mr. McAdoo to give that question.
With the national and local concerns about law enforcement, what will you do to improve relations between the Black community and the LR Police Department?
I think if people know I really speak from the heart. I'm offended when that question has to deal with the Black community. That's a problem that I have. The chief of police has been hired to deal with the total community. If there's a need, and since the word has been placed in your question, Black, a thing that Black people need to do, and that is to work with the family. It's no way you can raise an adult. You have to start from the bottom. And this is something that I talk about all the time until we get the parents involved at an early age. I don't know what the police department or anybody else can do with the Black community.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Shelton, please.
One thing that Director Richardson mentioned, I believe, in the last round of discussions was an encouragement of our police officers to live within our communities, and that's not, and I agree with it, it's not necessarily a Black-only problem. The Southwest Forum I went to last week, there was a Hispanic woman who came up and she had issues as well. But I think Chief Buckner's going to do a good job. He's working towards that. I also really like the COPP program he's working on with getting liaisons into the community and working with them as well.
All right. And Mr. Webb, please.
I say this is a twofold problem. The first issue when you're talking about building relationships between the Black community and the police department, the first issue is having an understanding of who you're protecting or who you're trying to protect. I think to address that issue intelligently, or we should send our officers as they're in training. If they're going to patrol in the Black community and they're not familiar with the Black community, then they should be required to go into those communities and get to know some of the people who live within those communities. I think that would be one way to do it. And we also, since we can't, for whatever reason, pass residency, we should have some sort of incentivized residency policy. That way, the officers who are in our community, officers can come from our communities who can better relate to some of the people within our city.
All right, thank you, Mr. Webb. Our next question will come from Carol Young with the League of Women Voters, and we'll start with Mr. Shelton for the answers.
In voting on planning and zoning issues, how will you balance the city's need for economic growth with the citizens' desire for livable neighborhoods?
I think that one of the things to work with people, a lot of neighborhood associations I've been to are concerned with some of the residential issues. I think we need to also work towards adding a commercial aspect to that. I think it has to be a commercial thing, and as far as bringing people back into the downtown area, not just residential. I think we also need to work with them to establish a construction guideline, especially during the downtown area and in the older areas where we can bring new businesses in, but they still adhere to our standards in the communities. I also have like to note that some of the larger companies such as Kroger and Starbucks do come into the community and do adhere to those construction guidelines and make it a nicer area and add convenience to the downtown, to our downtown citizens.
All right, thank you. Mr. Webb, please.
Can you give me a question again, please?
Yes. In voting on planning and zoning issues, how will you balance the city's need for economic growth with the citizens' desire for livable neighborhoods?
Unfortunately, those two don't go together, depending on who you're talking to. I think just having more, I just think having more community involvement, because we're not always going to agree. We're not going to always agree, and that's just we just got to try to find some kind of happy medium, because we're not going to always agree, especially when you start talking about economics and the benefit of neighborhoods. Those two are not synonymous in any way. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Hendricks, please.
This is really an interesting question. I think I understood you say you speak in reference to the Planning Commission.
Just what will you do to help balance the city's need for economic growth with citizens' desire to live in a livable
But
neighborhood?
did you use the word Planning Commission, though?
No, ma'am, not in this
Okay.
question.
The thing that I see is that the planning, it does involve the community, the planning department. That's the reason why I wanted to make sure you were saying planning commission. The planning department actually send notices out to the various communities where there is development about to happen. And I think that where the problem arises in some cases is that even though the community may receive these notices, they do not get involved. So who do you blame? Do you blame the city with their planning, or do you blame the community?
Thank you. Now we'll have two follow-up questions coming to our candidates. And candidates, your answers here will also be 1 minute each, all right? And the first one, Mr. McAdoo?
All right.
No, they choose between them. There's only one follow-up between the two coalition
All right,
members.
so do you have a follow-up? Or Ron, do you have the follow-up?
Go ahead, Mr. Ryan.
Oh, thank you.
You ready?
Thank you.
Oops.
That's all right.
Candidates have answered a lot of the questions I have here, so I'll take this one, which I think deserves a little bit more discussion. What would you propose for consideration by the Board of Directors and Mayor to remedy the proliferation of substandard and unsafe housing owned by absentee landlords throughout Ward 1?
And that will go to Director Hendricks.
Wow. I know whose question this is. Repeat it again, because I really want to be sure. I thought one of the fellows would be first.
It's
Repeat
actually
that
my
for me.
question. What would you propose for consideration by the Board of Directors and Mayor and Mr. Moore, of course, to remedy the proliferation of substandard and unsafe housing owned by absentee landlords throughout Ward 1?
Okay. What I have attempted to do in the 6-7 years that I've been on this board is to ask administration, which would be Mr. Moore, to get with those persons within particular wards 1, 2, and 6, because this is where you have a proliferation of, I would say, blight, burned homes, unboarded homes. And in this attempt, I have asked for new legislation, which we do not have. We right now, the City of Little Rock, is dealing with age-old legislation. So that's what it is. But I can tell you from where I sit, there has been a lot of properties demolished, but we'll remedy that once I'm reelected.
All right, thank you. And to Mr. Shelton, please.
I think that's a good question, because I've been lucky enough to live in Ward 1 with good landlords, but I have friends that live in Ward 1 with bad landlords as well. So I see the benefits of how having a good landlord works works so well and having a bad one doesn't. And I don't think it's necessarily absentee landlords as far as location as well. There are some guidelines, and I forget. I'm sorry, you have to forgive me. I forget the name of the law that's passed. It's a universal law for landlord tenant agreements, and it helps to address a lot of those things and a lot of those concerns. I think that we need to work towards adopting that as a city, and I really honestly think we should adopt it as a state, because there is a big problem with Little Rock and the state of Arkansas and landlord renter agreements, and I feel that I have an advantage in that I've not always owned my house. I'm lucky enough to own it now, but I think that we need to work towards adopting that.
All right. Mr. Webb, please.
If I could, can I have the question again, please?
Yes. What would you propose for consideration by the Board of Directors and Mayor and Mr. Moore to remedy the proliferation of substandard and unsafe housing owned by absentee landlords throughout Ward 1?
Well, we actually have a inspection program that was put on the books back in '94, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, we haven't enforced it. I would just try to find a way to use that program to address that issue. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Webb, and leave your microphone on. You will have the first answer to the next follow-up
Sounds
question.
good. Sounds good.
And that will come from Carol Young with the League of Women Voters.
I've heard you mention community involvement and talking about different boards and commissions. So my follow-up question will be to each of you, how will you attract diverse applicants for positions on city boards and commissions?
Well, I think the city board, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, the city board said they were going to make an effort to have more diverse boards. When elected as city director, I would just challenge the board to actually follow through on that promise. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then Director Hendricks, please.
I love this question because I don't know how many of y'all had an opportunity to see what happened at University Park. And I asked Mr. Moore to provide for me the roster of Planning Commission members. And I was just appalled to know that of the 11 commissioners that sit on that board, 90%, I would say, live in West Little Rock, which is unfair. And that is my move, is to change the procedure as to how and who serves on that committee, and to make sure that every ward is represented adequately on that planning commission, which does not occur at this time.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Shelton.
One of the things I will do is lead by example. I think that, as I said, we have a large group of younger people that are coming into the community, and I think that getting them involved as they continue to stay in the city, purchase houses, I think that's very important. I also think that we should, as I said earlier, work towards empowering the neighborhood associations and expanding their reach and advertising to where you have more people if you have more people in the neighborhood associations. You have a larger pool of people who are interested in the community and who want to serve on these commissions and boards and are qualified. And I think that some of the diversity issues will take care of itself by having a larger pool of people who are interested.
All right, thank you. That concludes the panel questions, and at this time we have some audience questions. Thank you very much. And this first question we'll start with Ms. Hendricks. All right. So the question is, several major highways and arteries cross through Ward 1. These are slated for renovation and expansion. How can you protect the neighborhoods and the quality of life against the need to rapidly and safely move through Little Rock?
I'm going to challenge that question. Did I understand you to say several what run through Little?
Major highways.
Such as?
So I presume, it's not my question, of course, but I'll just presume that that's Interstate 630, for example.
Well, that would not, and that would not be many. I do know that 630 runs through there, and I-30 runs through there.
Yes.
The thing that I would say is that, again, you're dealing with the highway department. And the highway department, as you may know, has much more strength and status than a city or local government. To give you a good example, when you look at Main Street, where we have a bicycle trail, and even though I am city director, I was not even made aware that the highway department was participating and caused those bike trails to be on Main Street. So it's something that if this should happen and the citizens are concerned about it, and not just one individual, I will address it when the time comes.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Shelton, would you like me to read the question?
Please.
All right. Several major highways and arteries cross through Ward 1. These are slated for renovation and expansion. How can you protect the neighborhoods and the quality of life against the need to rapidly and safely move through Little Rock?
I think that one of the things that we've mentioned before is just involvement and working towards helping to get the community involved and getting their ideas in front of the highway department and things like that. I think you're probably also referring to the Broadway Bridge, which is in our ward, and the possibility of a Chester Street Bridge. I am definitely in support of a Chester Street Bridge because it's a block from my house, and I have to go to North Little Rock frequently, and it'd be very much easier. But I think that putting together a plan and getting involvement within the community is the best thing we can do as far as being representatives and getting the community's opinion. And once we have involvement and can put together a plan with the different communities and also bring alternatives, I think is a big deal for us to say, we don't like how you're doing this, but will this suit your needs and suit our needs? I think you have to work on some push and pull and some cooperation between both agencies.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Webb, please.
And I think this question is probably targeted toward the State Fair and their expansion into neighborhoods. I think that's why it's really important now that we put together a comprehensive plan for redevelopment. Because unfortunately, again, what happened with Murphy Oil, if the University Park District had a plan for redevelopment, if there was some plan in place, other than, there was a 12th Street plan, but I mean, it's some other plan in place that said, okay, we have a comprehensive plan for redevelopment, and this is what we're planning on doing in this community. Unfortunately, we don't have a plan for redevelopment. We need a plan for redevelopment to address issues like this, and we won't continue to be reactive. For once, we'll start being proactive.
All right, thank you. Next question from the audience, and this will be our last question to the candidates directly, and then we will have an opportunity for candidates to ask a question of the other candidates, all right? So let me see. As a resident within Ward 1, how will you bridge the gap between the more impoverished areas of Ward 1 and the more affluent areas, such as a dialogue and community development that benefits all? And let's start with Mr. Shelton, please.
I think that when you start working with the different associations and start expanding the reach of those groups within the ward, you can also work towards having a top level forum between a lot of different people within different reaches. And once you get more people involved in your local organizations, you can expand to your larger organizations and work together. So I think that establishing that at the ground level helps to bring more people together. It doesn't have to just be people on the city board that get together and have ideas. City associations can do it as well. So,
All right, thank you. And Ms. Hendricks.
That's a good question, and it's one that I have talked about in the 7 years I've been on this board. The first thing I would really do, and that I intend to do, is to make an effort to change the makeup of this board. We have 11 board members. We have 6 of those board members that live in western Little Rock. We have 4 that lives within the more impoverished area. We also have our mayor that lives outside the city of Little Rock. So the thing that I would do is to change the makeup of the board in order that there would be clear and fair representation of all citizens in the city of Little Rock.
All right, thank you. And now, Mr. Webb, would you like me to read that question?
Please.
All right. As a resident within Ward 1, how will you bridge the gap between the more impoverished areas of Ward 1 and the more affluent areas?
I think that's why we'll have monthly town hall meetings. And those town hall meetings will just discuss issues that are happening in our communities. Because I think, unfortunately, what happens in Ward 1 is that you have one resident in Ward 1. You may have somebody who stays over on 14th and Arch who doesn't have the same issues as someone that stays on 28th and Harrison. So I think it's important to have town hall meetings where we all come together collectively and hear the issues of our community. So that way we can have a better understanding about how to move forward. But I won't profess to be able to fix the problems of the races. If I could, I would be here today. But the question is, I think, is creating those town hall meetings. The answer is having those town hall meetings and having everybody come in and give their input on how we can move our community forward and sharing with each other our issues and experiences.
All right, thank you very much. Now, again, the ordering here with the three candidates will be possibly a little difficult to follow, but what I'd like to do is start with Mr. Shelton, and he will have a question for the other two candidates. And then I would go with Mr. Webb to have a question for the other two. And finally, Director Hendricks, a question for the other two candidates. And remember, in each of these answers, limit yourself to 1 minute, please. All right? So if we could then start with Mr. Shelton.
Thank you. My question is something that wasn't addressed in the two that we received. One, and it is that we have specifically in our ward and some others, a large homeless population. We have a large group of people that are underprivileged, and my questions just are: we are in year 8 of a 10-year battle to end homelessness. As far as the plan goes, I believe. Do you think it's working? And also, what would your plans be to say if I, for some reason, if I was not up here, what would we be? Could we work towards municipally working together with our private organizations and getting forward to one goal and succeeding there?
All right, and let's start with Mr. Webb, please.
Oh, okay. I think so often what we find in our city is that we don't utilize our partners, and I think this is a key issue here is that we haven't utilized our partners. I think that we could have really put a dent in homelessness and some other issues in our city had we utilized our partners, had we pooled our resources, come together with a comprehensive plan. Because again, sometimes we lack to plan, and often it costs us in the long run.
And Director Hendricks, please.
As a board member, we have, with the support of some of the residents and particularly finance, there's a new building called Jericho that's out on Confederate Boulevard that services, and that service is also managed by staff. Transportation is provided for the homeless. Even though some may be working, they are carried to and fro to their jobs. So the city right now is doing what it can for the homeless with the expenditures that we have been allowed to spend from the capital zoning, the CDBG funding program.
All right, thank you. And then, Mr. Webb, if you have a question for the other candidates, and the first answer will come from Ms. Hendricks.
Okay. I'd like to ask the two candidates, how would you go about addressing blight in our community? How would you go about addressing blight in our community?
Well, I would say to Mr. Webb is that has been my task for the 7.5 years. And even though we get a lot of complaints from outsiders about properties being demolished, but once a resident, which has been my constituent, ask for such service, and that is to demolish a home, that's what I will do. I am here to represent the people that live in this district and those persons who ask of me to do things that they want. And as I always said, don't tell me to not demolish a blighted home when you're living in a bourgeoisie neighborhood.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Shelton.
One of my goals with empowering, and I keep going back to this, empowering some of the neighborhood associations, is I'd like to see some of the properties that are owned by the city of Little Rock that are vacant and that are lots. If we could work towards this, and I have an emailing with Tom Carpenter, this may not even be legal, it sounds too good to be legal, is to work towards getting some of the empty lots that are owned by the city donated back to qualified organizations so that they can not only use those lots for neighborhoods, things like community gardens and working parks and developing property of their own, but by the organizations owning those properties, they can also work towards securing loans and securing and having some finances that do not rely on basically, so they're not dues based as far as their income, and they can have a fixed income to start budgeting and working out towards advertising and getting community events out.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shelton. And then our last question for the other candidates comes from Director Hendricks, and that will go initially to Mr. Shelton.
I would like to ask of my opponent, what is it that you think that you could do better than what I have done in the last 7.5 years?
I think that
Come on with it.
I'm not being timed right now, am I?
Yes, you're on time.
I think I can work better with people, and I think that not being standoffish is a big thing. I think people are really tired of people in the city are tired of people of the standoffishness between board members, and it's not just one person specifically. It's just where people aren't really agreeing on for some areas, and I think that we just really got to work on cooperating and getting things done and getting majority of votes and support, especially back down into our ward specifically.
All right, thank you.
I want
Mr.
to
Webb.
repeat, may I repeat it to him?
I
I think I got that one. I think I got
Director
that.
Hendricks, I think he
got
got
it?
that question.
Okay.
Look him in the eye.
I think I got that
Make sure he
one.
knows.
I want to say first, I have a great deal of respect for Ms. Hendricks. I have a great deal of respect for Ms. Hendricks and her accomplishments to our city. But I say the one thing I could have done a lot better than Ms. Hendricks if I had been elected in 2010 was, if you look at Ward 2 got a $12 million substation out of the sales tax. If you look at Ward 6 got a $6 million community center. Ward 1 got nothing out of sales tax. That would have been my we would have improved in some areas. Many issues as we have in Ward 1. When you start talking about the elderly home program that benefits seniors, Ms. Hendricks did even fight to get money for that program. I would have done a lot better had I been elected in 2010. I would have done a lot better in getting something out of the tax, because the group I work with, we were able to get $3 million from the sales tax for Office of Ranch and a Skills Center. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're at the part of the forum where the candidates will give closing statements. Again, each of these is allowed 2 minutes, and we'll start with Mr. Webb, then to Mr. Shelton, and then to Ms. Hendricks. All right, so Mr. Webb, please.
Again, I want to thank you all for putting this forum together. I think it's very important to have informed and educated voters when making a decision to vote on November 4th. As I said earlier, I am a lifelong resident of Little Rock, and I've seen Ward 1 at its strongest. I've seen our city at its strongest, and I believe our city is at its strongest when it's working together collectively for a common goal. Unfortunately, in Ward 1, we're not working collectively toward a common goal right now. But if I'm elected, we will form a plan for revitalization. We will put that plan together. That plan will be implemented by Ward 1 residents, discussed by Ward 1 residents, and it will put Ward 1 residents to work to improve Ward 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shelton, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch base also. It's the Uniform Residential Landlord Tenant Act is what they call it. For one of our discussions earlier, it's something that we need to look up and implement. But too, I would also like to thank you for having this this panel. It's really always a pleasure to get up here and argue with these guys. Like I said, I'm not a lifelong resident. But I think that we're a growing group of people that are coming back in that aren't lifelong residents, that are new to Little Rock. I think that we need to work towards bringing new ideas. I think we need to start a lot of things from scratch, to be honest with you. I think we need to get a new face on the board. I think we need not just this area, but in also other wards. So I would like to thank you very much for your time, and just ask for your vote on November 2nd or 4th. Thank you. Vote for me whenever you want to, as long as it's by November 4th.
4th, though.
Or vote on each day.
Yeah, vote on each day. Yeah.
For Chicago, yeah.
Right. Early and often. That's
Early and
right.
often, that's it.
So, please, Director Hendricks, your final statement.
Thank you. I want to also thank the committee for allowing me to be here. and I did have reservations, but I want to be real quick. I want to share with the group that the funding for the tax increase had nothing to do with the board. Mr. Moore, who is our city manager, and the mayor decided that the police station would be on 12th Street and any other else that you see. But we did get our share. And all of this goes back to our reference with this discussion is that there is unequal representation as far as funding when it comes to various wards within this city. And I appeal to you as a citizen who has background. I have a master's degree from St. Louis University in urban planning development, which neither of my opponents have. I have had the experience of working in St. Louis with what I am attempting to bring to the city of Little Rock. Again, thanks for having me on this panel, and I think most of you all know that Irma Hendricks will tell you just like it is as a city director. And as I often say, I don't have to be a board member to have a voice. As a citizen, I can come to that podium at any time and say those things that need to be heard by the board of persons who sit up here. Again, thanks for having the panel. I look for everybody's support that has always supported me for 7.5 years as City Director, Ward 1. Thank you.
And thank you. And let me thank again all of the candidates for participating today and spending that time with us and being willing to be broadcast to the wider community. Also thank our panelists for your time today and your questions. Appreciate it so much. And I should also thank the organizers for allowing me to participate as a representative of the Hillcrest Residents Association.